everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Kamis. This is our first time for The Bridge to go live streaming on Facebook. We hope you're going to enjoy the show very much. So, today we're talking about a very important topic, the Biden era, a new dawn of hope for American Muslims and Arab Americans. That's the question we're going to be asking and talking about this morning with two distinguished guests. Dr. Abdelmajid Katranji is a political analyst and expert on Islam, the Middle East, and Muslim American politics. He is a board member of Engage Action USA and also the Syrian American Council. And my second guest, Mr. Bakr Muhyiddin, is the policy program manager at MPAC, Muslim Public Affairs Council. He has a master's of public policy with a focus on lobbying in Washington, D.C., and he's also a community activist who has been engaged in many activities in Dearborn, Michigan, which is where he's from, and many other communities as well. Welcome to the show, everyone. And I really appreciate being with us this morning and with our audiences on US Arab Radio and everywhere. So let's start by looking a little bit to the Trump era. That's where I want to start, right? I want to talk about what happened during the Trump era. Maybe a lot of our listeners and viewers, they know about it. But we just want to give a glimpse of the impact that this particular Trump era really had on the American Muslim community and the Arab American community in brief. I'll start with you, Dr. Katranji.
Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody. Thank you very much for having me on your show, Doctor. In brief, the Trump era was a complicated era. Because I think one of the most important things that we as Arab Americans or Muslim Americans have to recognize, nothing is absolute, nothing's 100%. You can't be looking at something as absolutely bad or absolutely good. You have to look at it in the spectrum. The Trump era introduced certain disadvantages by being an Arab American or a Muslim American, because very early on in his politics to just get elected, and the coalition that he built was designed to demonize Muslim Americans primarily, and that led to the Muslim ban, and which then subsequently led to the demonization of even Arab Americans, because the countries by which the bans occurred supposedly for terrorism actually ended up victimizing not just only Muslim Americans, but also Christian Americans of Arab descent. So the kickoff of the Trump administration was very horrific. Obviously, we're also Americans, and it's important to emphasize the American side of the equation. Some of the policies of the Trump, and I am not a fan of Donald Trump, but I'm always fair. Some of the policies, let's say necessarily in local economic development, was somewhat advantageous to many Arab Americans and Muslim Americans, because it did derive more of what I call the individual economic impact, because our communities are very enterprising communities, very often very entrepreneurial. And so therefore, some of the opportunities economically that were afforded actually led to the success and the growth for many businesses in 2018 and 2019. Obviously, 2020 is a reset for everybody across the globe because of COVID, but the election reintroduced the very same demonization policies to get that coalition of intolerance that successfully led Donald Trump to come in 2016. Again, remember, it's not just simply intolerance that led him to get elected. People who are Republican that voted for Trump were also Republicans that have a particular vision, and Trump happened to be their choice, not necessarily their favorite choice or their first choice. So I don't like to go into any extreme of any position, but there is no question that overall, for some of the issues socially and politically and on a global level, it did impact adversely, largely the Arab American and the Muslim American communities.
Thank you so much. This really brings me to another very important point, an interrelated point, which is how far can we think of these two communities, the Arab American / Muslim American community, as interchangeable, and also in terms of the impact which these Trump policies has had on them. Mr. Bakr, would you like to take this one?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Dr. Sahar. Good morning, and thanks a lot for hosting us. So starting with the interchangeability of American and Arab Muslims, I think that's a very common mistake that's always done. If we're looking at the trends inside this country over here, I believe the majority of Arab are Christians. And the largest proportion of Muslim Americans are African Americans. Furthermore, Arabs started coming here, I want to say, well, at least to Detroit, Michigan, with the auto boom to work in the assembly line in the very late 1800s, 1900s. And then we had the immigration patterns that come here while Islam came to the United States with the settlers, and then with the African Americans. It's Black History Month right now. They would say about 20 or 30% of African Americans that came on from the enslaved populations were Muslims. So and even the issues when you look at politically speaking, Muslim Americans tend to lead more progressive than Arab Americans, and Arab Americans, their political views tend to be very similar between Christians and Arabs and Christians and Muslims. So it's a very common mistake that's done, and it does lead to misrepresentations for both communities. So it's very important that they're both separated when dealing with their issues and with what their opinions may be.
Absolutely, and although there is definitely, of course, an overlap, because you do have, obviously Arabs who are Muslims, but it's also important to understand some of these distinctions, right? Some of these nuances and some of these distinctions. As I tell my students always at the University of Maryland, not every Arab is a Muslim and not every Muslim is an Arab. So it's important to also understand some of these differences and some of these distinctions, beside, of course, the similarities and the overlaps between these two communities. That's a very important point. I'll go back again to you, Dr. Katranji, with a question about the impact of this Trump era. How far can we expect these types of impacts to actually last, like possibly to have some kind of effect? So, for example, let's give the example of the Muslim travel ban, which is obviously one of the most obvious examples of the impact of the Trump era. Okay, President Biden fulfilled his promise and he did repeal the Muslim travel ban on the first day of his administration as he promised. But can we expect these types of effects to actually disappear overnight?
No, I think that's very important, and I think Becker brings up a fantastic point, even highlighting that we have this mistake of somehow that the Arab American community in the United States or the Muslim American community in the United States is a de novo phenomenon, that they just kind of showed up, especially in the post 9/11 era. These communities are old communities by American standards, and obviously by global standards, these are ancient communities. So we have to understand that as Muslims and as Arabs, we have to remain engaged in the society that we're in. We've been impacted, I think, by some of the immigration waves. And as it tends to be for immigrant communities, their priorities are a little bit different. What I mean by immigrant communities is that first generation, that first wave that comes in. So the mature communities in the Arab American community and the Muslim American community, largely, for instance, the African American Muslim community, you're going to see a lot of maturity in how they engage in their politics, in their understanding, because they know that politics is the art of compromise, right? As Winston Churchill says, diplomacy or politics is the art of the possible. And I think that as long as we stay engaged with both Democrats and Republicans across the spectrum that Becca described, we're always going to see rises or pulses of some of the fearful policies that we saw even post 9/11 with the Patriot Act, and some of the things that we experienced when we're in a queue to get on the airplane through TSA checks, because I'm sure everybody on this phone call has been very successfully randomly selected almost every time that they've tried to get on a plane, much like sometimes being that this black man looked like somebody that was on the news report or on the police bulletin of unidentified black male. I mean, these are things we're going to have to fight all the time. At the same time, though, if we stay politically engaged, figures and policies and cultural items start becoming part of the American fabric. Look, everybody in the United States knows what tabbouleh is. And that didn't happen overnight. Everybody knows, everybody in the United States talks about falafel. And now you watch a TV show like Chopped that talks about how hummus can be done in different ways. These things didn't happen overnight. And we know people like Muhammad Ali, probably one of the greatest Muslim Americans in history, who was the boxer, but just a power for social change. So these forces, as long as we nurture them through organizations such as MPAC or through Engage and the dozens of other organizations that are out there, will continue to evolve the integration and the interplay of the Muslim American community and the Arab American community in the fabric of this country.
Dr. Sahar, can I also chime in on the impacts of the Trump community, short-term and long-term, just with the doctor? So, yeah, go ahead.
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I kind of disagree with Dr. Katranji for Trump's influence. I agree that we need to be engaged across the board. We need to be engaged across all aisles of the political spectrum, have our voices everywhere. We are a small minority. We try to influence what we can through our different views. But what I disagree with is that Trump, there's good and bad everywhere, and nothing is black and white. But Trump's campaign wasn't campaign 2016, and his policies up until 2020, and then his campaign again in 2020 was just full of divisiveness and hate. We were painted as the others, us and many other communities, and he normalized hate in this country. I used to live in the South about a decade ago, and I used to pull over to the side of the highway and pray whenever I'm driving down the road. Now I wonder if I would do that anymore. If I'm in Alabama or in Louisiana where I used to live, I would definitely think twice about it. Even for our business owners, like in Michigan, some businesses did benefit from Trump's policies, and I think Trump just took care of himself. He took care of the big dogs. So some stuff trickled down to the Arab enterprises and Muslim enterprises, but I feel like a lot of businesses suffered, a lot of businesses complained. So I feel like his policies did not help our communities, and furthermore, his effect on the American fiber will be felt for generations to come, where he normalized hate, normalized if you're from Africa or from the Middle East, from other countries that are not white, then you are from those, excuse my language, from those crap hole countries, as he was caught saying. So his effect onto this nation hasn't been good, and I don't think it's going to be good for years to come.
But I'm not saying that it was good or bad. I think the highlighting thing is what I'm emphasizing to our communities is you can't just stop at one person. The advantage of the United States is it's a spectrum. I look 28 to 36%, depending on what polls you look at, of Muslim Americans and Arab Americans voted for Trump. So the fact of the matter is nearly a third of the community in both categories voted for Donald Trump. So what I tell you is if you want me to talk about Donald Trump personally and his policy and politics, I think it's his big mouth and his racism that didn't get him reelected. But the challenge for people, and what we cannot ignore, is 71 million people did vote for this person. And you can't say 71 million people are hateful or spiteful. And at the other side of the spectrum, the 80 million that voted for Biden aren't necessarily people who are going to be pro the Muslim American or the Arab American communities. So we would be naive to think that everything is kind of an absolute bubble when it comes to American politics. Mm-hmm. I think Trump, the advantages, he did actually expose the fact that there is institutional racism and institutional bias, whether led by a Democrat or led by a Republican. Guantanamo Bay was built by Republicans. But those cages that those immigrants were put in was built by a Democrat, President Obama. Trump capitalized on the hatred and portraying Muslims as others. But Obama was very successful in killing thousands of innocents by drone strikes for supposedly terrorist targets. So we cannot be just, this isn't to say Obama's evil or Trump's evil, but we as our community advocating for Muslim Americans or advocating for Arab Americans need to be as engaged and with any and all parties, and at the same time aware of both what advantages we have when we engage one group and what disadvantages we have when we engage those same groups.
Absolutely. This is all very excellent points. Thank you so much to both of you for really unpacking these complexities, right? And we'll come back to this very interesting discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Ziyad brand, quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Al-Majid Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263.
Kashat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab offers a great array of your favorite Mediterranean meals. Meals range from lamb specialties, shawarma sandwiches, seafood dinners, and they offer special big trays of your favorite food, plus much more. Kashat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab address is 32839 Northwestern Highway in Farmington Hills. Their phone number is 248-538-9552. That number again is 248-538-9552, and the supermarket is open from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Kashat's Mediterranean Market and Shish Kebab will definitely leave you satisfied.
When you're looking for the best in optical care, Dr. Imad Nakash is your doctor to see. With years of experience and thousands of successful procedures performed, you can trust your eyes to Dr. Imad Nakash. See Dr. Imad Nakash and his professional staff for your eye care needs. There's 2 locations to serve you. In Hazel Park, call 248-336-3937. 248-336-3937. In Rochester Hills, call 248-299-3937. That's 248-299-3937.
Back to the show, everyone. We are happy to have you with us today in the first live streaming on The Bridge on Facebook, as well, of course, on US Arab Radio as usual. We are talking today about the Biden era, a new dawn of hope for American Muslims and for Arab Americans. And with me this morning discussing this important topic are Dr. Abdul-Majid Katranji, a political analyst, and Mr. Bakr Muhyiddin from Impact, the Muslim Public Affairs Council. So, Mr. Bakr, let me come to you with this question so we can end with the Trump era and move to the Biden era, which is really the topic of our discussion this morning. What lessons could be learned from the Trump era for both the American Muslim community and the Arab American community as well? What could be the lessons, the takeaways from the Trump era for both of these communities?
I mean, the lessons that we can learn is that, first of all, our voices are absolutely important. Our votes are very important. We are never voting, as Dr. Katranji pointed out earlier, we're never voting for a prophet or for this great supreme leader for this country when we do give our votes, because most of the time a lot of their policies do hurt us, and we end up choosing between which policies are more devastating to us. However, as 2016 showed and as 2020 showed, states flipped by a 1% margin and even less, and this has been seen in many other elections in 2020. In 2004, if an extra 0.5% of Ohio voted the other direction, Kerry would have won the whole election. Strategically, Muslims and Arab Americans are about 1% of the country, give or take, in different areas. Arab American community in Dearborn could have flipped Wayne County, which would have flipped all of Michigan to Hillary Clinton's campaign, which would not have been enough at the time. But with enough states of our engagement, we decide who our future leader is for this nation as Arab Americans and as Muslim Americans. And once we know the power of our vote, that the power of this 1%, then the policymakers will start listening to us more. They'll start taking us much more serious. Donald Trump didn't win the popular vote in 2016. Hillary Clinton lost the election more than Donald Trump won. However, if she paid more attention to us, a little bit more than she could have potentially been in the White House for the past 4 years instead of Donald Trump. So I think the main lesson is that our voices do absolutely matter in this country.
Absolutely, I cannot agree more. Our voices count, and we have to learn how to make them loud and clear and heard. These are very important and essential points. Thank you so much. Dr. Katranji, you are a member of Engage Action USA and also the Syrian American Council. If you can give our listeners and viewers a brief idea about each one of these organizations and what kind of role they actually play, that would be great.
Well, for the Syrian American Council, it advocates for the Syrian American community on interests such as TPS for refugees here in the United States. It tries to create a Syrian American Economic Forum, like a Chamber of Commerce. It also is engaged in the humanitarian issues to help advance the rights of Syrians and Syrian refugees globally. So it's been very active with that, and has had great success in engaging several leaders and thought leaders that were involved in the administration, both during the Obama era and with the Trump era, each one presenting its own challenges. Obviously, in the Obama era, we had some great individuals on a low level, like for instance, through USAID, and I don't mean low level that they're low, but like in terms of administrative policy, USAID and the State Department. And there are some gems that we discovered. For instance, there's a great American, Syrian American. He's also part of Engage. His name is Wael Zayed, and the executive director of Engage. And it discovered that there's a wealth of knowledge actually that exists in the administration that happens to emerge from our communities, the Arab American and Syrian American communities, as well as the Chaldean. I know Chaldean is a Christian, but the Chaldean community, even though they're not Arabs as they identify themselves, but they're part of that family of the Middle Eastern groups that celebrate being part of the United States. You've got Iraqi Americans, you've got Egyptian Americans. So we discovered that there's a lot of wealth as we've improved our engagement. And Engage is at play. The M stands for Muslim, but Engage, to engage the politics, really just identified that there's a lot of grassroots awareness of the Muslim American community primarily, and with other organizations, for instance, the Arab American Council here in Michigan, that there's a grassroots recognition of Arabs. These organizations now are engaging at that level because, believe it or not, all politics is local. We talk about national elections, but the Secretary of State, Kamala Harris, Senator of California, right? Whoever becomes the Secretary of State, whether it's John Kerry or Jake Sullivan, these are people that you have to get to know when they start their careers. And I think a great success, and MPAC has been a phenomenal partner with Engage in that grassroots engagement has opened doors that is an investment not from today, but actually things that were started in 2005 and 2006. So there's great hope in the Biden administration specifically, because for a lot of the grassroots efforts that Engage was involved in, MPAC was involved in, and several other organizations, the people that we're seeing now in the administration were people we met when they first started their careers in 1999, 2000, 2001. And the other great optimism moving forward as signs are improving, this is a record number of political appointees that are of Arab American descent or Muslim American descent that are in the Biden administration. People also have to remember, it's not just being Secretary of State or Secretary of the Interior and those high-level positions that's important. There's a lot of appointees that are heads of councils, heads of committees, heads of white ribbon committees or White House executive advisory committees, or they become heads of departments under those Secretary of States. Those guys carry tremendous weight and influence on what affects us as Americans. And I'm proud to say that there's a record number of both Muslims and Arabs that have been appointed under the Biden administration. So with these types of organizations, that's how we gather these resumes and advance these names forward to get appointed.
Absolutely, I cannot agree more. Thank you so much. And Mr. Bakr, if you can give us an idea about the MPAC as well, Muslim Public Affairs Council, for our listeners and viewers who may not be aware of this important organization and the role it actually plays and what kind of activities it engages in.
Sure. So the Muslim Public Affairs Council was founded in the 1980s in Los Angeles, California, and I believe they opened up their office in Washington, D.C. Probably about 15 years ago or so. So they do what's called uproots advocacy, which is advocating with the government, with government agencies, with Congress, with allies, with the government as well, as compared to other organizations that work on the grassroots. So MPAC does do some work on the grassroots level with Mgage, with CARE, with other organizations that get out the vote initiatives and whatnot and get people elected. However, the bulk of our work is engaging with the various agencies of the federal government. And the other half of the organization in Los Angeles also engages with Hollywood, engages with writers, with script writers for movies, for shows, to make sure that Muslim American or American Muslims are portrayed in a way that's not disingenuous to who we are.
Excellent. Thank you so much for giving us this idea about MPAC and the important work they have been doing for many years now. Now let's move to the new dawn of hope, right? Which is really the topic of today's discussion and today's program. Dr. Katranji, when we talk about a new era, right, which is the title of today's program, really, how do you see this new era, the Biden era, in terms of the potential and possible impact and effect that we can possibly see on both the American Muslim community and also the Arab American community? And what makes you maybe possibly optimistic or hopeful for this new era?
I think one of the beautiful things about the United States is literally every 4 years it's a new era, right? Even if a president's reelected, the people that surround that particular president oftentimes change from one term to the next term. Biden gives a lot of optimism in the sense because Biden has a strong history of engagement with various communities. So this is not something new for Biden. He's got both what I would call new political alliances and old political alliances. So much like the name of your show, he's a tremendous bridge historically between communities, between parties, between political factions. So this tells us that the age of divisiveness that Trump celebrated and capitalized on should be significantly weakened by a president like President Trump. And when you look at his political appointees, and the people that are getting approved largely by majorities in the Senate from both parties, those approvals are indicating that he's selecting very successful, capable individuals that are then able to reach out to all sides of the aisle and all sides of the American political spectrum, whether conservative or liberal. Maybe not necessarily to the satisfaction of the extreme right or the extreme left, but those sides also have to recognize that America's strength is it's in the center. And the great thing about the Muslim American community and the Arab American community, we are the center. And one of the things I like to say is we are the margin of victory. We are just big enough to be on people's radar and also of significant enough size that we make the difference of that 1%, from local elections for your judge all the way to national elections for your president. And I think that gives us great opportunity because we can see that reflected. The Biden administration actually actively have Muslims and Arabs appointed in their administration, recognizing that those people are from strategic communities where that 0.5%, 1% margin is where they won those elections, and that made the difference for democratic elected officials at every level. With Mgage, that's one of the with the chapters that Mgage has in different states. That helps that political mentorship and that political development that leads to this outcome that we see with President Biden.
Absolutely. These are very important points. It's important also to recognize the number of Arab Americans that have been appointed so far or selected for the Biden-Harris administration. We have so far 7 Arab Americans. 3 of them are actually women. That's awesome. It's a good start. I expect more to come, which is excellent. And we also have to realize that 69% of the Arab American community actually gave their voices. They voted for President Biden versus about 35% only who voted for Donald Trump. So indeed, we should realize and acknowledge our power and the power of our vote and the power of our voice and engagement. We'll come back to this very interesting discussion right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
At Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic in Dearborn, we provide effective physical therapy sessions in order to limit pain and discomfort. Top Rehab provides physical therapy care for any diagnosis prescribed by a physician, and we regularly see and treat conditions such as stroke, TMJ, fibromyalgia, sciatica, joint pain, and more. We use a variety of pain management methods, including modalities, soft tissue mobilization, and therapeutic exercise. If you're in need of physical rehabilitation or physical therapy, get the highest quality health care at Top Rehab. Most insurance is accepted, and we're open Monday, Wednesday, and Friday 8 to 6, Tuesday and Thursday 8 to 5, and Saturday 10 till 2. Call for an appointment today at 313-846-0555. That's 313-846-0555. Choose Top Rehab Physical Therapy Clinic on Michigan Avenue in Dearborn. Life's too short to be in pain. Enjoy the first Syrian-style cuisine in Michigan. At Damas Cuisine and Catering, you'll find a wide selection of Syrian foods and sweets in our menu, like frike, hoizi, grape leaves with steak, mashawi platter, hot mahashi, char-grilled kebab, shawarma, and much more. Get super fast delivery from Damas Cuisine and Catering right to your door. Order online at damascuisine.com/menu and track your order live. Damas Cuisine and Catering, 28841 Orchard Lake Road in Farmington Hills. Call 248-987-4985.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Najee Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Najee Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Najee Abood, 734-744-9796.
Everyone to The Bridge. Today we are live streaming for the first time on Facebook. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're discussing a very important and timely topic, the Biden era, a new dawn of hope for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. And with me this morning discussing this important topic are Dr. Abdelmajid Katranji and Mr. Bakr Muhyiddin. So we want to come back to the idea of now we have a new era, we have a new dawn of hope, hopefully for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. But we also learned some lessons, some very difficult and hard lessons, obviously from the Trump era, and we don't want these to be repeated again. For example, let's take the repealing of the Muslim Travel Ban 1 and Muslim Travel Ban 2. How can we possibly put certain mechanisms in place in order to make sure that such things not happen in the future? For example, there's discussion about implementing something like the No Ban Act, which would prevent any other president or leader in the future from doing something similar. What other measures, Mr. Bakr, can we possibly expect to put in place as Arab Americans and Muslim Americans to make sure that we have a better era and hopefully a better future even beyond the Biden era?
Okay, so more than passing legislation and that can ensure that there is no more bans made on immigration that are based by ethnicity or by religion or by economic trade with the United States. What I'm going to have to reiterate my point from earlier that we need to engage with politicians. We need to engage with our votes. We need to engage with our voices. We need to engage with elected Congress members by calling our senators, by calling our House of Representatives. Let them know how we feel about laws that come into play. We have people in Congress now. We have Muslims in Congress. We've had Arab Americans in Congress in the past. We have Arab Americans in Congress now. We need to engage with our politicians to have them introduce the bills that we feel will protect us from future administrations passing xenophobic executive orders, and then as communities with our allies, with the communities that support our causes, we reach out to our elected members and make sure that they do vote these bills into legislation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. These are very important points on the legislative part or the legal part. We also know, of course, that the communities themselves also have a big role to play. So I'm very interested as well in the aspect of community engagement and community activism at the grassroots level. What could the average, Arab American or Muslim American do in order to really play his part or her part in this process? Dr. Katranji, if you want to weigh in on this point.
You bring an excellent point on the grassroots level, and that's where I think the greatest amount of change has occurred. We went from what I would call an identity politics community to a much more engaging and involved grassroots community. We evolved from the photo opportunity where we're just happy that an elected official showed up to our door or at our masjid or at our church and said, hey, look, I would like to get your vote. This is my opinion. You guys are a great community. Let's have some hummus and tabbouleh, picture, and then they move on. The reality is that's not policy, and that doesn't change anything. What we saw in the Biden election in 2020, the Arab American community, especially, for instance, in Michigan, overcame its historical, what I would say, imported divisions and really started focusing on being Arab American. And a lot of that had to do with the generational change. A lot of the leadership in many of these organizations are actually second and third generation Americans of Arab descent. The same thing we can see with organizations such as an MPAC or Engage on the Muslim care, on the Muslim side of things. They're not carrying the burdens or and lighting the torches of the divisive politics that may have existed in Syria or in Lebanon or Egypt or Pakistan or Malaysia. And at the same time, they rediscovered each other here in the United States in the sense of the Arab American, generation two, second and third generationers meeting the fifth, sixth, seventh generationers of the early 1900s. So there was a much more unified voice. And it's really important then to recognize that you're American now here. The politics and the debates that we could get involved in if we were in, let's say, Aleppo, Syria, or in Hyderabad, Pakistan, or in South Africa, don't exist here. And those fights aren't the fights to be won here. This isn't the forum for it. And I think that's how the Arab American community and the Muslim American community will continue to grow and prosper here politically. And then therefore seeing that social adaptation is because we are now really identifying ourselves as a distinct community, with great diversity within ourselves. But that's something to celebrate, no longer that causes our organizations to falter, divide, and oftentimes defeat each other during the election process. And that's I think the step that we have to go.
Dr. Khamis, if I may add that on the grassroots level, if we continue being ourselves and engaging with outside communities, that would definitely help future legislation or future executive orders coming in. Donald Trump did not introduce the Muslim ban out of nowhere. He ran with it as a campaign promise. And he ran with it as a campaign promise because he tweeted on Twitter, ban the Muslims or the Muslim ban, and that got the most retweets and the most likes. That became a campaign issue. ISPU did a study that Islamophobia decreases 30 or 40 or 60 or 70%, like from like 70% in Islamophobia to 20% Islamophobia if they knew a Muslim. And whether you are a Muslim or you're Christian Arab, to the average American, you are a Muslim. Sikhs faced Islamophobia after 9/11, and they're neither Arab nor Muslim nor from the Middle East. So by us engaging with communities, by engaging with as business owners, as on the school boards, as just parents that attend school meetings for our sports, because we will definitely decrease the probability of a Muslim ban being passed again in the future.
Absolutely, I cannot agree more. And one aspect I really want to ask you about, Mr. Bakr, is the idea of youth engagement as well. I know that you worked a lot with youth communities in particular. Young people are a very important force, and actually they are the future. When we talk about the future of the Arab American and the Muslim American community in the United States, we can never turn a blind eye to youth because they are the future of these communities in this country. So I want you to give us an idea about some of the activities, the engagement, the grassroots work that really involves youth in this kind of change that we're expecting under the Biden administration and beyond.
Sure. So as under the Biden administration, I guess the youth of our community, by them seeing members of his administration, by seeing the day before yesterday Samira Fazili go up with her hijab, speak as an expert representing the Biden administration, that gives them hope that that can be them one day. They can reach those spots. The work that we're doing with the youth at MPAC, we have, like, for example, our Congressional Leadership Development Program, where we take 24 students from all over the country and we place them on the Hill. We help them get their internships in the House, in the Senate, and in committees. We give them a very generous stipend, provide them housing, which, generally speaking, these tend to be the biggest barriers for marginalized communities or minorities to be able to enter on the Hill in the first place. And we push them and we help them get these positions, and they can become the next Rima Dodin. I'm sorry, the Rima Dodin, who was recently appointed by President Biden out of the House of, out of the U.S. Senate. She used to work for Dick Durbin. She was the most powerful Muslim in Congress for years, and she was not elected, where she became a deputy director in his legislative affairs, right? And she is now the first, I believe, either Palestinian American or Palestinian American woman in the White House, who is unapologetically Palestinian as well. So work on the grassroots with the youth tends to come one-fourth from the inspiration of what's going on right now with the upstream work. And on the flip side of it, there is a major trend from the past generation to the future generation. Let's say both our present generation, that's the wrong terminology, but from the older and the younger generations, is that the older generation, and I think it follows the immigration patterns when your family migrated to the United States, but they tend to move away from foreign policy more to local issues. To domestic issues. So youth tend to care more about healthcare, Medicare for all. They tend to care more about student loans. They want to graduate college without having mortgages as a student loan for each person of the husband and the spouse. They care about equality. They tend to care more about domestic issues and vote on domestic issues than generations that come with the baggages and face the hardships back home of U.S. policies abroad that tend to vote with a foreign policy lens more.
I'm so glad you mentioned these great examples, and also the example of Dr. Samira Fazili, right? We were so proud of her, being with her hijab, her headscarf, and, appearing in front of the press corps at the White House and talking as an expert and having this important position as well in the Biden administration and in the White House. And there are so many other shining examples, but we need to shed the light on them. And we'll come back to this very interesting and important discussion right after this commercial break. So stay tuned, please.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Al-Majid Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263. Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights. When it comes to reproductive medicine, IVF Michigan Fertility Centers are the recognized leaders. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 5 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. As a founding member of IVF Michigan Fertility Centers, Dr. Nicholas Shama is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. Dr. Shama has performed over 10,000 IVF cases and has helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. American board certified in both obstetrics obstetrics and gynecology and reproductive endocrinology and infertility, Dr. Nicholas Shama is a very caring, compassionate, expert physician that understands not only the medical but also the emotional toil of infertility on his patients. When it's time, get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio. Call toll-free 855-952-9600, 855-952-9600. Life is a nonprofit charity that's provided humanitarian aid and development to people and communities for over 25 years, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. When disaster occurs here or around the world, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. Please help improve these efforts. Make your tax-deductible donation to Life now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493.
Welcome back to The Bridge, everyone. It's our first time live streaming live on Facebook. I hope you're enjoying it as much as we are. We're talking today about the Biden era, a new dawn of hope for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. And with me this morning discussing this important topic are Dr. Abdelmajid Qatanji and Mr. Bakr Muhyiddin. Dr. Qatanji, we talked about the role of youth before we went to this commercial break, how youth can be engaged and the importance of engaging them in activism on all different grassroots levels to ensure a better future for Arab Americans and Muslim Americans. But we also know that these communities also have minorities, especially, for example, the Muslim American community. You also have the African American Muslims who represent almost 20%. Together with the Latino Muslims represent almost 20% of the Muslim American community. So that is a sizable and important proportion. As well, we have women, of course. Women have to also be engaged. They have to be actively involved, and they have to be integrated. We talked about Dr. Samira Fazili, but we want to have other examples. How can we possibly engage and make sure that these different groups, besides youth, you have women, you have African Americans, you have Hispanic Muslims, how can we possibly engage them more in this whole process of activism and engagement to ensure a better future for generations to come?
I think it's a vital role. I think the important thing I want to point out is I'm still youth. I've just been 25 years old for 26 years in a row. So, I'm Sheikh al-Shabab. Maybe not Shabab anymore, but Sheikh al-Shabab. But all kidding aside, that's going to be critical in the sense that I was having a discussion with my son who's 19 years old. And in the past, a lot of times when he's talking, I'm just trying to convince him of what I'm thinking. And I'm discovering that, wait a minute, he's impacted by totally different social forces and economic forces and cultural forces and religious forces than I am. I didn't grow up with Facebook. I didn't grow up with he grew up with that. I grew up with different networks of kind of community youth activism. About being a first-generation Muslim and Arab American. My son is dealing with it as now the second-generation non-immigrant Arab American. It's a different maturity. And so you discover that it's important that our organizations remain flexible to recognize that are they there to promote an issue or are they there to promote the community? If you're there to promote the community, then you have to reach out to the components of your community and make sure that their interests are at play, whether it's women, whether it's, different cultural groups within that organization, whether it's youth, whether it's even the elderly, right? Because now we're dealing with a generation that thought they would immigrate back to the Middle East and retire there. And now they're discovering their retirement and even their gravestones are here in the United States. Some of them are sorely unprepared for that. So if we're just going to be issue driven, we will underserve our community and fail to make sure that all components of our community have a voice. In several organizations such as Engage, we have forums for women. We have forums for the African American community, for the Indo-Pakistani community, Arab American community. We have forums for the youth. We have internship programs for the youth. And we also develop mentorship at the local level by hosting events often run by youth. One of our great superstars in our organization is a young lady named Nada Al-Hamouti, who's been phenomenal. She's now our executive director at Engage for the state of Michigan. But you just look at the energy that this young woman brings. When she wants somebody who's been in politics for 30 years to do something, You better believe this young lady will make me do and jump through the hoops that she tells me to jump through to make sure things happen. But you have to be able to be flexible as an organization, because you have to remember this organization is here for Neda as much as it's here for me. That's the attitude that we have to take in our organizations to make sure that all parties have a role to our success.
Absolutely, thank you so much. And Mr. Bakr Muhyiddin, you actually did your Master's of Public Policy on lobbying and the impact of lobbying in Washington, D.C. So I have to ask you the question, have the Arab American communities and the Muslim American communities been successful enough in lobbying? And if the answer is no, what can we do to actually improve this kind of very important power and impact, which is the impact of lobbying in Washington, D.C.?
So, Dr. Sahar, my study of lobbying in Washington, D.C. was more foreign-based lobbying from the Middle East. And the Middle East spends millions and millions of dollars a year between the various countries, between the Gulf, between Israel, between all the different factions fighting for influence in the United States. As Arab Americans, as American Muslims, as well as these two communities that live over here in America, all these millions of dollars are spent to influence the people that are in power. The people that are elected, they do not, they work for that money to get to and for the causes of where that money is coming from. However, what puts them in those seats is our votes. So it comes back to we don't lobby with our money. We don't need to lobby with our money. We need to show up to the polls and show up to the polls on as Dr. Katranji pointed out earlier. It starts all politics is local. That's a famous expression from a past Speaker of the House during the 1980s. All politics are local. That starts over here, wherever you live, with your school board elections, with your city council, by being engaged, even with your PTAs, with anything in your locality. Whoever makes it out to Washington, D.C. will listen to you and will follow the votes that put him or her there in the first place before they follow where the money is coming from or what the money wants you to do. So you lobby with your votes. Your power is your vote. That is your voice. That will make the absolute biggest change in Washington, D.C. Collectively as a community.
Absolutely, I cannot agree more. These are great points. And I like the part about politics starts from the local level. This is a very important point. Dr. Katranji, do you think we as Arab Americans / Muslim Americans have been successful in terms of lobbying? The question I just asked Mr. Bakr Muhyiddin, and also the local politics level. How much have we been effective? I've seen some young, Arab Americans and Muslim Americans now running, for different places, different, positions at the local level, some of them on the national level. Talk a little bit about this, please, in like a couple of minutes. Thank you.
There's no question that the rise of elected officials that are Muslim American or Arab American has exploded over the past 10 years. And people, again, oftentimes mistake national elections as the only defining election. But you remember when you're in that ballot box, you're noticing that, there's school boards, there are water boards, there's county commissioners, there's mayors, there's city councils. And alhamdulillah, you can see across the spectrum that we have just a rising tide of these leaders. And the beauty of this leader is it kind of exemplifies the example of what Becca says. You don't get elected just because the Muslims voted for you or the Arabs voted for you. Dearborn could be an exception because of the intense population there. But the fact of the matter is you get elected because you're an American that means something and presents something of great value to all voters. And it's that type of engagement at the local level, at the school board. You start seeing changes in textbooks where a lot of the erroneous statements that we called Muslims, for instance, Mohammedans or Saracens, gets removed. That the stories of Arab contributions to science, like the word al-Kahod and al-Jabra, and it starts getting introduced that, by the way, there was math and science in the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages in Europe, but it was an area of enlightenment and Renaissance in the Middle East during that same time. So all these components that you can see are signs of the success of our engagement. And I think we will continue to grow to one day maybe see a president or a vice president that celebrates being an Arab American or a Muslim American.
Hopefully that's indeed the hope. Thank you so much, Dr. Katranji. And Mr. Bakr, you get the last word here in just a couple of minutes because we're running out of time. Unfortunately, good times always fly quickly, as they say. We want you to talk a little bit about your own hopes as a young person in this country. What are some of your hopes and dreams for the Arab American and Muslim American communities moving forward? What would you like to see happen?
So first and foremost, I would love to see our community stay united and work together for the same causes. As Dr. Katranji pointed out earlier, that we see more unity now, and that might be because Trump hated us all equally, or rather waged rhetoric against our communities equally, regardless of what sect you're from or what country you're from. So I did see a lot of unity, a lot of barriers that used to exist between the different communities around the United States go down over the past few years. So I hope they stay down, first of all. I hope that we stay shoulder to shoulder. And to add on to it more, I do want us to stay united regardless of our political differences, or what spectrum, where you land on the political spectrum, whether you go towards the right or towards the left, that we stay and work together, not cancel each other out, but support each other and help each other reach powers of influence. So in the future, whether you are a businessman or businesswoman, you're a medical expert in the universities, and it doesn't matter, in the sports world, no matter where you are, you will gain influence and you will be a voice for our community. So my dream is to see that our community stay united and they stay working together, regardless of where they land on the political spectrum or career or across the board.
Absolutely, I'd say amen to that for sure. Amen. You know, we hope and pray, inshallah, that this is indeed the hope and the future for our communities, the Arab American/Muslim American community. We should see our differences as a strength, as a power, not as a weakness or a limitation, because it adds to our own beauty, our own diversity, our power and our impact in this country. We just need to learn the tools of how to make our voices heard and to make our interests and demands clearly articulated, and always stand together and stand united. As we say back home in Egypt, where I come from, originally I'm Egyptian American, we say we cannot ever clap with one hand. You need both hands in order to clap. With that, we come to the end of our great show today. I hope everybody enjoyed it as much as we did. Thank you so much to our great guests, Dr. Abdelmajid Katranji and Mr. Bakr Muhyiddin, and to all our listeners and viewers everywhere. Thank you, stay safe, stay well, and goodbye.